Hey, this is Jonathan Gilliam, and I usually come on here before the show and I pitch my book, Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness in Attack Survival, a best-selling book that will change your life, help you see how attackers see you so you can set up better defenses. It has 2 workbooks that you can get as well, the Threat Assessment and Defense Assessment Workbook, and for the children, The Adventures of Team Little Bigs, a parent's book for children. It's a book of pictures for children 2 through 8 that have security and awareness and communication lessons built in it, and the parent goes to teamlittlebigs.com. Great for young children and learning disabled. That's normally what I talk about. You can get those wherever books are sold. But what I want you to know about today is that I have set up a GoFundMe page, gofundme.com/the experts podcast. And what this does is not necessarily for the podcast, but I'm taking the podcast on the road. And ultimately, this is what it's all about. It's about getting all of your Patriot groups together on the same page. So I'm going to try to go around from group to group throughout the country and help develop one plan for all of them, coordinating communications, coordinating task organization, coordinating standard operating procedures, and help them see that they're not alone, help you see that you're not alone, and do it all around the country. Nobody has ever done this before. Now, most of these groups don't have a budget to pay for me to come there, and they don't have a budget for me to go to other places and find out what they're doing and help coordinate with them. In fact, a lot of people don't even think it's necessary, but if you look at the news, if you realize who's in charge of this nation right now, you'll see how important it really is. So go to gofundme.com/the experts podcast. Help me finance this so I can get out and around the country. I'm going to bring the 1776 bike with me and all the different adventures that come with the Experts podcast. But more importantly, help you, the Patriots in this country, finally start to come together, formulate a plan of how you deal with the onslaught of communism, socialism, whatever they want to call it, and how you take control of your nation again. Now let's start the show.
The truth has arrived.
My name is Jonathan Gilliam, and this is The Experts. And this is Jonathan Gilliam back on the Experts podcast. Every day that I'm on the news, it seems like I'm on Newsmax almost every day, or on the radio or this podcast, we're talking about some things going on in the world that, it's just different than it used to be. The ethics, morals are gone. The narcissism is out of control. I've been screaming about this for a long time, but communism, there's actually people in our government now screaming communism. We live in the freest nation in the world, yet somehow all of this evil has just kind of come together and is out like never before. I don't remember in our history at all ever being like this. And the common thing amongst all of this, whether it be the activists, whether it be the corrupt politician or scientists, you can't even trust scientists now in what they say about COVID or anything else. It's just everything is skewed politically to the left or to the right or for control. The common thread through all of this is that there is some crazy psychological stuff going on. And, I think I said this when I was on the TV the other day. I have a degree in psychology, but a bachelor's degree doesn't mean anything. I also have a degree in political science, so I know a bullshitter when I see one. But other than that, I don't really, I can't tell you a whole lot about counseling, except for when I counsel somebody, I just say, hey, listen, what's the problem? Fix it. That's my counseling for somebody. So I figured I would bring on somebody who knows more than I do, a tremendous more about this than I do, and somebody who sees things. This is what's very interesting about my guest, is that she sees things from the police level because she deals a lot with law enforcement and crime behavior. And that's Dr. Catherine, or Katie, I guess. Do you go by Katie?
You can call me Katie.
Okay, Katie Kuhlman. And she's a board-certified police and public safety psychologist based in Scottsdale, Arizona. She has spent her career helping law enforcement and other first responders throughout their career, which is that's got to be fascinating, the things that you see with cops.
There's not a better job.
Yeah. Explain that. What do you mean by that?
For sure. There is not another group of people that I would want to work with besides first responders. So before I worked with first responders, I would have internships in like jails and whatnot. And
Ugh, that had to
I
be
would
rough.
take the good guys over the bad guys any day. They're hard workers. They've got a great sense of humor. I don't have to bullshit them. I don't have to sugarcoat anything. It's great.
You are an expert in the field of behavioral threat assessment and targeted violence, which is, okay, very interesting. You're working with the good guys, but when you were in the prison system, and I got a lot of buddies who are prison guards in Arizona, actually, that work for the system out there. It's a disaster, that system. Working with the bad guys versus the good guys, these people are manipulators versus other people who are basically suffering because of these manipulators. These criminals cause all these problems in the world, and these law enforcement officers that have to deal with this, the good guys, their issues literally they're taken home with them. They take these issues home with them, and I think most people see that. So I guess the first question I have for you is, when you were in the prison system, what kind of counseling were you doing there, and what do these people have? Is it just mental illness, or what kind of counseling were you actually doing with them?
Well, in full disclosure, I didn't counsel many of them. My role when I was there was really to assess them and figure out if there was any kind of mental health issue, and then they would figure out where they needed to be transported and housed. But a lot of manipulation, really uncomfortable as a young woman in a maximum security male prison, if you can imagine.
Wow.
So a lot of catcalling, just an uncomfortable environment overall. And there's no way that I could do that long term. I mean, you're being lied to all the time. And so, being in that position, I feel for cops, because that's what they have to deal with every day, is people trying to manipulate them and trying to lie to them and trying to work the system.
Yeah, that's catcalling to a whole nother level of when you're inside a prison, I would imagine. So with these cops and with the bad guys, so do you think, I know this is kind of outside the realm of psychology, but some of this stuff sticks on people, right? When you're around these bad people, when you were in the prison system and you're interviewing these individuals to find out if they're crazy, and there's all kinds of mental illness that people could have, whether or not the legal system thinks that you're crazy is a whole different story, because as long as you understand right or wrong, you can do any number of crazy, what we would say crazy things, but legally for prosecution, they may be deemed sane. But some of the evil that's in these people, does it stick with these cops? I mean, I know what I feel and I know what I've seen, but I want to hear it from you. Have you seen that, where it's almost as if it's a particle that's sticking to these guys when they come home?
Oh my gosh, yes, absolutely. I mean, from what I've seen is that, it's not necessarily that there's one call or one person that they talk to that, pushes somebody over the edge and creates, post-traumatic stress or, post-traumatic stress injury or disorder. It's just accumulation over time. It's right when you're constantly dealing with bad guys that have done horrible things, when you're constantly talking to victims that are sharing their stories and there's all of this emotion attached to them, when the majority of your day is spent dealing with, the worst people in the world, you kind of start to forget the positive. You become jaded. It's
right.
It just happens over time. Absolutely. It sticks with people.
So I was in, one time I was with a source that was having medical issues, so we had to take him to the hospital, and we were in Bellevue on a Friday night, which is in New York. That's the most, really one of the most dangerous places you could be, in the emergency room at Bellevue, which is a city hospital in Manhattan. And all the Rikers people come there. And so they had a big prison fight, and all these dudes were on gurneys in their orange outfits. And one guy in particular, I mean, he had to be the most evil individual I've ever seen. When you looked at his eyes, they were as deep and black as anything I've ever seen before. And he was just mouthing off, and the doctor came up, this female doctor, she came up, she was trying to ask him some questions, and he was just belligerent and cursing her out right there. And I'm not the type of guy who sits back and allows somebody to yell at a doctor, let alone a female, like he was yelling. It was probably the same things that you heard in the prison. And I snapped my fingers at the guy, and I said, "Hey, you shut your mouth and let the doctor talk." And he looked at me and he goes, "I will effing kill you." And he just stared at me. And I just looked at him and I laughed. I said, "Probably not going to happen today, though, right?" And everybody kind of laughed. And the stare in this guy was something that would stick with a person. Like his evil would imprint on you, especially if you were trying to arrest this guy.
He stared through your soul.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but my soul's made out of titanium, so it bounced back. I wasn't scared. So with these officers, and I'm getting to something here with the psyche of the American people, right? You know, these officers, they get up every day and they want to do the right thing, regardless of what mainstream media says. They try to make it out like, well, most cops are good. I mean, the reality is 100% with just subtract a tiny, tiny bit, wake up every day to do good. But they're educated by the environment that they work in. Really, that's who molds them. It's not the academy. It's not even their sergeant or their training officer. It's the environment in which, the neighborhoods in which they work. With these individuals, when they come and see you, what do you think is the main thing that's getting to law enforcement officers that's breaking them down psychologically when they come home?
So the way that I see it is it's like a cycle of abuse with cops. You know, if you look at, the past year and a half, just like you see in, domestic abuse situations, is that cops there's this princess period where cops were treated like heroes. Thank you so much for being on the front lines,
right.
And all that you do, and you're putting your lives on the line. It's so unsafe with COVID. So they go from this high to then this huge low after George Floyd. And then all of a sudden it's like it's like just a spike all the way down.
Right.
And then it's just abuse. And now everyone is horrible. They're called pigs. They're, getting water bottles thrown at them, spit on, death threats. Their families are receiving threats. Kids are afraid to go to school or afraid to say what their parents do for a living. It just creates this cycle. And so, like, when a person experiences that type of abuse, and it is a cycle, because there's also huge groups of people who support the police. I posted a picture on my social media. I think it was back in August. There was a group here in Arizona called the Blue Line Crew, and they would have these rallies all over different parts of the valley, and people would just be waving flags. And so it was 115 degrees. I was standing on the corner of Scottsdale Road and Greenway, waving a flag for 2.5 hours, 115 degrees outside, with probably 100 something other people, right? So they experience those highs when they drive past things like that, or all the blue line flag stuff that you see.
Right.
And it's just this, like, it's such a contrast, right? It's like a pendulum swinging to both extremes constantly. It's a cycle of abuse. And so that, I think, takes a huge toll on people, because at our officers, because they never know what to expect or what's coming up next.
Yeah. You know what's interesting about that is the contrast between Arizona, which you just described, and New York, and especially the NYPD. Most of the officers that I worked with when I was in the FBI, my partners were detectives. So because we were on a task force, and the task force is populated like that. They'll mix agencies together. So every partner that I had while I was there was a detective from NYPD, and it's different from what you were just describing, because they get to a point where they just don't like anybody, and they don't trust anybody. But when they go home, it's you don't see the celebrations here a lot of the times. I mean, now you kind of do out here on Long Island. You'll see some celebrations and things, but by and large, NYPD gets very little. They go to work, they deal with the stuff, and they go home, and they just become bitter. And in a lot of times they become, and I know my NYPD brothers and sisters will agree with this in a lot of ways, a lot of the cops become useless because they just don't even try anymore. It just becomes a job.
Well, why would you?
Yeah, it becomes a job where they're just going to retire.
Yeah, I think as humans, you kind of weigh the risks and the benefits in any type of situation. And so, yeah, so if you're a cop, why would you risk being proactive?
Yeah.
Why would you, attempt to pursue somebody if you think that you're going to get, sued or shot at? It just doesn't make a lot of sense.
Or be nice.
You're not going to get in trouble if you just don't do anything.
Yeah. Or be nice. I mean, like, I found when I left the FBI and then I was a civilian, man, it's a very rude wake-up call because like one night, 12 o'clock at night, right down there at the park where I live in, listen, I'm not a serial killer. You can go at 2 o'clock in the morning and people are walking around in the park in New York by Riverside, and they would be walking their dogs and stuff. So I was walking my dogs down there, and the cops were down there. You're not supposed to be out down there after 12, but that's where I used to go when I would get off work in the FBI. I would take my dogs and go down there and walk, and it might be 1 or 2 in the morning. And then, of course, I was armed, but then I would come back, Well, when I went down there this time and I'm a civilian, I didn't have my creds. I didn't have those things. And there was a patrol car down there, and they just looked at me like I was, a drug dealer getting ready to bolt. And I just waved them. I said, "Hi, guys." I walked around a little bit and I left. And I remember thinking, those guys don't even put a smile on anymore. I mean, I'm just a guy with 2 dogs. There's no way I'm going to do anybody harm. And they looked at me like they were about to arrest me for being in the park,
Yeah. And it's like, why would you be friendly when 90% of the people that you're coming into contact with every day are treating you poorly, and you don't know if, how they feel about you or if they're going to attack? Why would you?
And
let your
poorly
guard down even a little?
Poorly is understanding, just like catcall in the prison. I mean, they get treated really bad. So with this being said, okay, with these guys and their men and women, they're going home. They're getting up to do the right thing. They're dealing with this stuff, and then they're going home. What does that do to their psyche over a period of time when it comes to, I don't want to say their manliness, but their ability to be, what's the term that I'm looking for here? Not outspoken, but to be assertive. What does that do to their assertive psyche? Because that's an important part of being a cop, is somebody who is comfortable being assertive for the right reasons.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that they're hired with that quality, right? So,
Right.
So I screen officers. I do the psychs before they get hired as well. And, that's one of the things that we look for is people who are bold, who are confident, who are not afraid of confrontation, but can do it, in an assertive and not aggressive manner, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And so these are people that have been screened to do the job, right? They have these qualities. They have that kind of temperament already. That's what we want in law enforcement officers. And so now we're telling them, nope, you can't do that anymore.
Right.
And so if you tell them that they can't do it on the job, they're going to do it somewhere else.
Right.
Right. I mean, if that's part of who you are, that's going to have to come out. So if you're going to put a lid on it at work, so then what's happening at home, mm-hmm. right? Like then you're going to start to see impacts on relationships with your spouses or your kids or, your family members, friends.
And what do you find in this circumstance where people are in their right, and that's part of their job is to be assertive? What do you find happens to that assertiveness? Like when it comes time to be assertive, what happens? So they come home and it exerts itself in this, whatever fashion, could be bad relationships, whatever. But when they're on the job and it comes time to be assertive, what happens?
Well, they're second guessing themselves, which is the last thing that we want, right? We want officers to rely on their training. I think that the officers in this country and the officers that I've worked with have some of the best training out of everyone. And so I want them to be able to rely on their muscle memory and to like hear their FTO in the back of their head mm-hmm. when they're, talking with a suspect or somebody. And so now they're second guessing themselves because they're wondering, well, who's video recording this? Is this going to end up on YouTube? Is this going to result in an IA complaint? I was speaking with an officer a couple of weeks ago who had just gotten written up because they cursed they cursed at a suspect during a foot pursuit, and it was on their body cam. And I said to them, I said, so what were you supposed to say? Like, stop running, silly goose?
Hey, stop being bad.
That doesn't work.
Yeah, exactly.
Please, with a cherry on top. That doesn't work.
Now they can't, in Chicago, they can't, in Chicago, they can't even chase them.
Right.
It's ridiculous for the number of crimes. That's what one of the things we're talking about this morning on Newsmax is that they stealing a purse. Right? Unless there's $400 or more in that purse and a police officer witnesses it, they can't chase the perp. Now, first of all, how are they going to know if there's $400 in that purse? So basically they're just telling them you can go up and steal a purse in front of a cop and they cannot chase you in Chicago.
What if the purse is worth more than $400? Does it change?
Does that mean cops have to go through a school now about the value of what purses are? I mean, this is the ridiculousness of this, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. But here's where I'm going with this. Okay, is that what I see, and a lot of the questions that I'm asking you, I actually have seen up close, right? So, but your explanation is way better than mine. So, when we see this, it's kind of like a close in, or like to say the 100-foot view of what's happening to the country from the 30,000-foot view. I look at patriots in this nation and people who care about the country as suffering like these cops, right? So you have the cops who they're assertive, they understand they're the good guy, they're going out there for the right reason, and when they do their job, they're vilified, they're called racist, they're told that they're no good, and then they go home and they're in a quandary. I'm doing the right thing, but I'm being treated terribly and told that I'm a racist and all these things. When they come back to work, eventually their assertiveness is going to decrease to the point where they don't even get involved. And then in certain cases, I guess they start to believe that they're really the bad person. And I see the American psyche of this citizenry the same way. We do patriotic things, we're called weird. You go and support the cops, you're called the racist. You say you're conservative or you voted for the Republican Party, you're literally called evil when you're the one that's trying to give people true equal rights. Mm-hmm. Do you see this? It's not just me.
You're not crazy. Okay. Take it from me.
That's true. You're not just a doctor. You didn't just play a doctor on TV. So how do you get officers back into their, to where they're being their best on a daily basis around or through this? And do you think that we can do that with the American people the same way?
God, I hope so. I mean, what I tell officers is, think about the reason why you got into this job in the first place. Mm-hmm. Right? Like go back to that young, 22-year-old kid that was so excited, to go on calls as a rookie. See if you can bring some of that back. Mm-hmm. But just go back to your roots. And so sometimes that helps, and I also tell them to think about some of the good calls that you've been on, or some of the positive interactions that you've had. I had an officer that was talking to me about some off duty that they were working. It was in a crosswalk at a school. And these little kindergartners were coming up to them and giving them hugs and telling them thank you. And that brought tears to their eyes. Mm-hmm. He was crying in front of me. And so I was those are the moments that you have to remember, right? That's what humanity actually looks like. And you're just seeing this small subset of the population. And I think that's kind of what we need to think about too, as the American people, is that it's a really small group that's just really loud.
Yeah.
They make a lot of noise. They seem bigger than they are, but when you look at the numbers, most people love America, support America. I don't know that they're maybe as patriotic as you and I, but that's okay.
Right.
They can do you. Most people don't want to defund the police. Most minority communities don't want to defund the police. Mm-hmm. But why is it that the narrative that we're hearing about is that everybody feels this way? I think that's the bigger issue.
Yeah, that most of the people I've found that really do want to defund the police are people that don't live in the inner city. It's people who are activists who live just like the girl who started Black Lives Matter and then goes off and gets rich and buys all her family members $1 million homes, not in the hood. She buys them way away where crime is not an issue. So I see that a tremendous amount with these people as far as the loudness. But I will say this, and I know that the cops have to be feeling this, that the indoctrination over the past 15, 20 years has gotten worse and worse. And there is a growing. We do look at this as the loud ones as a small group of people, but it's what they own. They own media. They own businesses, or they're CEOs of businesses. They're deeply into politics, and now sheriffs are being elected that are very left. It seems like the foundation, which is these young people that are being indoctrinated in school, that number is growing tremendously. and they're saying stuff that isn't just like, I don't like police. They're saying they're communist and they like communism. So with that being said, have these officers talked about that? You know, in other words, we know that evil people and violent people are always going to exist no matter what, but are they seeing this more where they're dealing with people that are not from the hood, that people are so far left that they just hate the cops and they don't know why, but they've been indoctrinated with this belief that the government or anything that is trying to do something ethically or morally in the government is bad?
So I will say the caveat here is, right, that I'm in Arizona and like we're our own little special place.
Yeah.
So the officers that I talk with are not, that's not their concern because, you know, by and large, the majority of Arizona is, you know, I still think that we're a red state.
Yeah.
I refuse to believe that we've gone blue. That's not what I see.
Right.
And that's not what I hear. So I don't hear that here, but that is what I see, is that like the people that I'm friends with, for example, you know, from childhood on social media, the ones that are saying, oh, we need to abolish the police, they're usually privileged white people.
Yeah. They're white, you know, they're people that, instead of saying privileged, they're people that don't live in the hood, right? They're white people that don't live in the hood. That's what they are.
Right. And they have no idea of the plight of the people who do live in these disadvantaged areas, who really do want more police presence because they want it to be safer.
Right. Now, I got a buddy who I was wanting to have on here, and I just was not able to get in touch with him for this episode, which I'll have him on again. But he is also a doctor in psychology, Cody McGinnis, and we've talked heavily about narcissism and how the rise of narcissism and the different levels of narcissism that people are now like striving for, especially on the left, and how that's starting to affect things versus just violence or gangs or things like this. Now the police are having to face, and the American Patriot are having to face people who think that they're a hero that's going to save this nation on the left. And have you heard police talk about this issue at all? About the arrogance and the narcissism of these people that they're dealing with?
Oh, of course. And I think it doesn't take a rocket scientist to kind of see what's going on here, is that, you know, in this day and age, narcissism is reinforced.
Right.
You know, we've always seen it in politicians. I mean, of course, there has to be, and you know, to any degree, I would say anybody who's successful is going to have a tinge of narcissism, because you want to be successful and you want to be the best, and you're willing to do what it takes. But narcissists will step on other people's toes. They will, you know, tear other people down and make them feel stupid. They'll gaslight. All of this stuff. And you see this a lot, and it gets reinforced through social media with the number of likes that you get and how many retweets you get. And, you know, just the sheer amount of attention. And if you can say the most absurd thing, that's going to get you more attention, and that's going to be your rise to stardom. And
right. And no discipline. And no discipline. There's no, you know, listen, I grew up in Arkansas. We were paddled in school. In fact, I think someplace in Arkansas you still can be paddled if they get the parents' consent. But, you know, we were taught, and I've had this debate back and forth with people about paddling and spanking a child, but I knew when I did something wrong, and I knew that there was consequences. Now, a lot of people would argue and say that, you know, you should never raise a hand at a child or whatever. And I'm not asking you to, you know, unless you feel comfortable with that saying one way or the other, but kids don't know that there's a right or wrong. They don't know those limits, and they don't realize the grand scheme of when you're doing things that are bad, the further you push, it doesn't mean that you're getting more powerful. It means that you're going down a bad road further and further down that bad road. How would you, if you were dealing with somebody who's a cop, you know, you're talking to a cop, we'll take it back down to the 100-foot level here. And you look at the cop and you're saying, he's coming in, or he or she's coming in saying, I deal with these people. The narcissism is out of control. I don't know how to function and be assertive. What kind of advice, or where do you take them? How do they resolve this? Because I'm trying to get to a point where I can say to the American people, this is how you resolve this. I mean, I don't know how we get around or how we deal with these people properly, because you can yell at a narcissist and they just end up enjoying the fact that you hate them as much as they enjoy the fact that you might love them.
Well, for office, obviously it would depend on the situation, of course, right? Like there's times where you pick your battles, right?
Right. That's
and,
a good one.
Maybe you just disengage.
Yeah.
You don't give them the time of day. It's like if you're an officer and you're working a riot and you've got people screaming names at you, do you really want to get in that power struggle and give them what they want on video? No, you don't.
Yeah.
You maintain your composure, and that's how you win that game. And like when I would get catcalled in the prisons, right? Did I yell back at them or no, I just ignored them because what they wanted was my attention.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's like a game of chess sometimes, I think, is that like you're trying to like outsmart your opponent.
Right.
And sometimes I think just like maintaining composure and not engaging in that power struggle is the way that you defeat that entitlement and narcissism.
How important is it with law enforcement officers that are going through these issues to work together as a team in order to do this, to confront those things, right? You have your partner, especially in a riot or a protest situation, or just daily when they're going out there and they're doing the job. How important is it for them to be relying on each other in order to deal with these issues?
Well, I think it's hugely important. I mean, you can't have one person acting out, another person maintaining composure, or one of the guys telling their partner, "Hey, man, you need to calm down," because then that just makes them all look bad, right?
Right.
If you're having to do that in front of other people. So having a game plan and having good camaraderie and having good teamwork, and I think especially in police departments, it comes from the top too, right? And what's the messaging that's being sent?
Right.
What's the support that these officers are getting from their command?
It's unbelievable. Everything that you're saying is exactly what we see in the public's eye, right? The top down politicians, the Republican Party. This is what I was grumpy about this morning on Newsmax, is that they had an assemblyman on there, and he was saying all these things about why that the left and Democrats are doing this and that. Never did he say the Republicans need to step up. We need to take charge. We need to start doing better. So that was my thing, because I see the Republican Party as a failed party. They are not like the Democrat Party. They have a full playbook. They can start a riot, a protest, or a party in an hour anywhere in the nation and coordinate it from wherever. The Republican Party doesn't even do those things. They only work to get people elected. Yet we put people in office and they don't do anything to battle what's happening. So from the very top, there's an issue. It's very similar to law enforcement. Like you just said, they have incompetent people at the top a lot of the times, or people that just don't care, either stopped caring or never cared about their officers and are there for careerism.
They're removed, or they have to play politics.
Yeah. And so when you get down to the level of the people, having a game plan, which is what you said, most patriots do not have a game plan. Even the groups where they say, well, we're a patriot group or whatever, they don't have a game plan. They don't understand that. They think we got to wait until we go to guns. They don't understand that, you can go out and voice your opinion, not in a rally, but in opposition, right to their face. And they just don't have a game plan. And so when they get out there, they're very divided. And it's exactly what you're talking about. So when they go home, they get on social media, they bitch and complain, and they don't ever do anything to affect change. And it's like this. The reason I was excited when I read your bio and having looked at what you actually talk about a lot of the times was that I see this, having been in law enforcement and being a civilian in the patriot world, I see these two things, and these worlds are exactly the same, just on different levels.
Yeah. Well, to your point about not speaking up, I feel like the people that do try to speak up then get in trouble. I mean, look at the deputy in Idaho that was fired after he made that TikTok where he was mocking LeBron James.
Right.
And like, that was I thought that was, first of all, it helped humanize police and showed a different side of them that maybe the public doesn't always get to see. But it was like a way to stand up for an issue in a really like lighthearted and humorous way.
Right.
And then what happens?
He gets fired for that. Unbelievable. This is totally off topic, but one that I think is somewhat kind of related, I think. I watch a lot of Netflix, right? Netflix now, I mean, during the pandemic, I think I watched everything on Netflix and all these other channels, but it's all serial killer stuff. It's all witches and all end of the world stuff now. And I can't not wrap my brain around that and think that there's some reason why every single thing on these networks, including, Prime, Amazon Prime, and all these other networks, it's all about evil constantly. Didn't used to be like that. What do you think about that? It's just a shotgun question because it's really strange.
Well, that's what we like. We're attracted to news stories that are bad or negative or they're sad or they're gory or they're violent.
But it's on a different level now. It's like being pumped. It's like the only thing you can find now.
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people are also really interested in the human psyche and like what makes people tick. And so they get really into, especially those documentaries about serial killers.
Well, those are interesting.
They are. Yeah, I agree.
But so the reason I'm asking this is because I can't help but think of programming. Everything that the left does, and they own Netflix and Prime and all this, that's all owned by leftist groups. I can't help but think that there's reasons why that is the only programming on there. Like you go today, if you listen to this podcast, go and look at Netflix or Prime and scroll through. You're going to see Vikings, serial killers, witches, and end of the world. That's it. And
Jonathan, are you sure that's not just the algorithm from what you've been watching?
I don't know. Maybe that's what it is. Oh, geez. Maybe that says more about me. I challenge people to go look at it and then tell me on social media what you think. Well, what do you see when you go on there? What's your
I'm
algorithm?
trying to think because I share it with my fiance and he likes all of the violent stuff. And I'm going to, have like the Lifetime movies. Or like, some stupid reality or dating show. There's some of those and those are not bad.
Yeah.
But I do agree, right, that there's, it is a lot of violent stuff.
I'm very suspicious. I'm very suspicious.
And we wanted it during the pandemic, right? Because we were like thinking it was going to be the end of the world.
Right.
And so a lot of that stuff people just got really into.
I don't know. I'm very suspicious.
Is it cheaper to produce?
I don't think so. I don't know because I can't tell. And I know this is me going way out on a limb here, but I can't tell if, because this is one of the ways that they, especially now that nobody's in school or they're going back to school now, but this is another way to indoctrinate people. So when you make people feel as though and if you watch enough of this, people will start to feel like they live in a world where there's rebellion and sorcery and all this type of stuff. I mean, I wonder if that's getting in some of these people's heads, especially the young people, because they live in a fantasy world.
Oh yeah. And they live in a fantasy world. And I think that it also kind of starts to desensitize them to some of this violent stuff. And that's not what we want.
But what has happened to the psyche on the 100-foot level and the 30,000-foot level? What changes have you seen that are the most dynamic?
Well, I think that for a large part, we are making our decisions and we're crafting policy based on emotions rather than objectivity and science. It's all instant gratification. Nobody can wait and see how things play out or wait to gather evidence. It's, we want things right now. We want things yesterday.
Right.
And I think that's one of the biggest problems. And in my opinion, I do think that the left tends to do that quite a bit more. I mean, on the right side, we're definitely not innocent when it comes to it, but we don't do it as much. That's for sure.
Well, I think that's the downfall of the right is that this
we can't keep up.
Yeah, but the gratification part of it. That's why rallies to me are dangerous for the right, because the left will have a rally, but they also have a game plan, so they get energized and then they go back and they actually do stuff. Whereas on the right, they get energized. I mean, the entire time Trump was in office, I'm a huge Trump supporter, but he would have these rallies with 30 to 70,000 people, and then they would just go home full of energy, and there's no guidance. They had nothing else to do except feel like everything was going to be great and, Trump was going to be reelected. They didn't see the alternative to that. And I just see this thing playing out that it's getting so much worse, so much faster than it was, say, 10 years ago.
Yeah, I completely agree.
And are there things happening that people don't notice that you see, counseling these officers, being able to, you live in a free state. Really, Arizona is so free. People don't realize how free you feel out there. And then seeing what's going on other places, do you see things that other people don't see from your perspective? I mean, that other people need to realize it's happening?
Well, I think that they do need to recognize it's freedom, right? That yes, in Arizona we're very much free, but look what's happening. I mean, free speech is being taken away. You're getting kicked off social media, or you're being canceled, and that goes into all the whole cancel culture stuff. That you whatever you said 15 years ago is now relevant again today, and you can be canceled for that.
Right.
It's just we are lambasting people for just the smallest, littlest things and not focusing on the big picture. We're constantly putting out fires and not seeing what we need, the absolute big picture. I think that's maybe what people are not seeing.
That's excellent. Again, I see everything is going on at the micro level and the macro level at the same time. I mean, people are feeling this individually, and it's being done, felt on a grand scale at the same time. It's very, very fascinating. Let me think. I want to hit you with one other good question. When, I'll tell you what. Let me ask you about this. Oppression, right? Officers are oppressed largely. When they're out there, they want to. I know people are going to say that the cops are oppressing them, but the reality is these officers are oppressed. They're tremendously oppressed in their ability to do what's right for the nation. They're judged on who they are. In many cases, they're vilified for wanting to do good. How does one battle against that feeling? Because the Democrats have been telling minorities, which. I'll be honest with you. I don't really know what that term minority is, a made-up term, right? This person has dark skin. This person has light skin. To me, they're the same person, right? I don't judge them one way or the other. But when the nation tells one person that they're a minority, then they're going to believe that. And they're going to believe that they're oppressed. And that's what the Democrat Party is. It tells these people that they're oppressed. And they don't do anything but enrage the anger in those people that they're telling are oppressed. You deal with people who are oppressed, who they're not victims. They don't want to be oppressed. How do you help them through that? What is one of the things that people can do? Because a lot of people I talk to feel like they can't say what they want. Like you said, they'll be canceled, they'll be fired. How do people deal with this feeling of oppression?
Life is all about purpose and meaning. And so if you can find some type of purpose or meaning, then that will get you out of feeling that way. So that's what I tell them. So it may be, maybe it's the job. Maybe you just have to start seeing the job as a means to put food on the table. Yeah. And that's the purpose of the job. And you find another purpose outside of work.
And how do you keep that meaning of purpose, finding that, or that feeling of meaning and purpose? How do you keep that from spiraling into a narcissistic thing? Because people will try to find meaning and purpose, and they'll end up looking for attention.
I don't even know how to answer that question.
That's good, though.
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
It's a great question.
And I think officers
don't be an asshole.
Yeah. I think officers need to realize that too, because especially young officers, they enjoy the attention that they're getting. I'm no fan of TikTok and cops doing stuff and, military people having social media thing. I don't like that. And I think that's where they're venturing into notice me versus I'm here to serve, So the reason I ask that is because, like, I built this motorcycle, the 1776 bike that I'm going to take and show around and everything and be a part of when I speak. But I got a tremendous amount of meaning out of learning how to bend steel and do all these different things and work with other guys to build this. And I'm worried that people that they don't have this meaning and that they're seeking out recognition. And I see this a tremendous amount in these Patriot groups. That's what happened January 6th.
Right.
Typical psychologists. Psychologists are the hardest people to interview, by the way, because you guys are you're not used to answering the questions. You're used to getting other people to answer the questions.
We're great listeners.
Yeah, that's not good when it comes to interviews. Listen, I can't thank you enough for coming on here, and I know that we've been on Newsmax before together, and I hope to be back on there with you again. I mean, the stuff again that we're dealing with now is, and that we're commenting on a daily basis is it's just different than it's ever been before. The violence, the degradation, the nasty behavior that people have, and the ridiculous policies are like something that it's never really existed before in our lifetime.
Yeah. And you and I are speaking to the choir.
Let me ask you this one other question before you go. Is there, when people talk to liberals that are just out of control and they don't believe anything, same thing with cops when they deal with people in these high crime areas, how do you suggest that people talk to people like that? I mean, do you just walk away and not try? Or is there any way to get through to somebody who is completely indoctrinated? Hard question.
The way I see it is like in psychology, you're taught if you're working with somebody who's psychotic or delusional, you can't argue with the delusion.
Yeah.
So you can't argue with them in that moment. But what you do with somebody who's delusional is you hit them at the emotional level, right? So you once you can develop rapport with somebody and they feel like you understand them, then you can reason with them. Right. So that's how you get in.
Right. Yeah. That's actually I'm so glad I ended with that one. Rapport. That's the primary thing, especially family members and friends that you're losing because of social media, because of these politics. People are losing friends that they've known their whole life because they're not building rapport. They're trying to argue on that level of insanity.
Yeah.
Dr. Catherine Katie Kuhlman, board certified police and public safety psychologist. I thank you very much. Have you back on anytime when you have something to say, which I don't know how often that is.
All the time.
All the time. Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Yes, anytime.
Okay. I really do appreciate it.
Of course.
You know, when we look at oppression, whether it's on the individual or group level, there's a lot of people in this nation that think that they're oppressed because the left tells them that they are when they're really not. But when we look at the micro and macro level, the individual and the group oppression, what we see is very similar responses to that oppression. Assertiveness starts to go away. People start to question themselves. They start to be afraid to speak up because they're afraid of what they'll lose or afraid of the punishment. See, that is the trap that the oppressor gets you in. So in order to fight against that, you have to stand up and stand against them. I'm Jonathan Gilliam. This is The Experts. The truth has arrived. Peace. I'm out of here.